So much has changed in the NHL since our post-World Juniors mock draft, not just with the standings and the different prospects that could get taken, but also Bob McKenzie's latest rankings have been put out, which gives us a great idea which prospects could go where. And today I'm delivering you guys a new top 16 NHL mock draft for the 2025 NHL Draft. A lot of changes, especially near the top, that we're going to get straight into. Now, to determine who gets the top picks in the draft, I simulated the NHL Draft through Tankathon to see who would end up getting it. Now, of course, San Jose has the number one odds, going by Chicago, Nashville, Seattle, and Buffalo in the top 5. And when we simmed it, we got some pretty interesting results, as San Jose keeps the first overall pick, but Utah rises up 8 spots to get second overall. And that leaves a lot of teams in the dust, with Chicago, Nashville, Seattle, Buffalo, Philly, Pittsburgh, Anaheim, and St. Louis all dropping 1 spot. But already early in the franchise, Utah has way more lottery luck than Arizona did. And this is going to have some major implications, especially towards the top of the draft, that we're going to get into right here, right now. Getting us started at that first overall position, a spot that is going to be debated from heck and back. I mean, there's going to be a lot of teams out there that I think could go in multiple different directions. But we're starting out here with the San Jose Sharks, and to me, as they look to rebuild that defense, Matthew Schaefer is going to be their selection. Of course, San Jose already selected Sam Dickinson 11th overall in last year's draft as a lefty, but I think him as a second pair defenseman would be absolutely incredible. But considering Matthew Schaefer is how dominant he was already as such a young player in his draft year, I think that's somebody that San Jose just won't be able to give up on. And as we look to the future of that Sharks defense with players like Dickinson and Polkamp, having Schaefer as that solidified top pair puck-moving defenseman, I think would turn it from okay in the future to quite solid. Schaefer, I think, will give them that extra element, though, and that extra offensive confidence that they don't quite have, even though Dickinson is pretty great himself. Considering the rest of that San Jose roster, especially in the forward group, having a player like Schaefer rush up the ice with guys like Celebrini, Smith, Eklund would just be so much fun to watch. I think San Jose could still draft a centerman, but I'd rather draft a guy that could be more of a second line center with the Dallas first round pick that they just acquired. Adding a top tier defenseman, I think, is the priority, and Schaefer is right there for the taking. Now we move on to second overall, and we go on to the Utah Hockey Club, and this is what I was talking about with Utah potentially being a disruptor if they were to move up this high in the draft class, because I think most teams would go for a Michael Misa or a James Hagens, a center at second overall. But with the Utah Hockey Club, I think they will end up selecting Porter Martone out of the Brampton Steelheads. To me, when we look at what Martone is, what he can be, this is somebody that Utah is going to absolutely adore. Look at who Utah and Arizona have drafted, especially with their first round picks. Players like TJ Ginla, Dmitry Simashev, Maverick Lamoureux. These are all guys that can play mean, tough games. And Porter Martone is that, with an element of skill that I don't think they've really drafted up to this point. This is somebody, especially when we look at the right side of that forward group, which I think is a little bit of a hole going forward, and Porter Martone fills that pretty instantly. He's somebody that just has so much potential as this first line power forward, is somebody that I think is still number 4 to me outside of that clear top 3, but is still an excellent prospect. And you can see the domination he's had in the OHL this year, 67 points in 38 games. I love the playmaking, the vision, the creativity, the physical engagement. It's all there. I would have a little bit of an issue with his pace of play, especially on the rush, but in his case, it's working still in the OHL, and that frame, that adaptability, that potential, I think Utah is going to be all over. Now, we have a big debate at third overall and a lot more prospects to get to, but let's first talk about today's sponsor in BetUS, the place to make your hockey picks and football picks as well throughout this season. You can go through NHL games, also the Stanley Cup, but you can also go through the Super Bowl and all the different options you have there. I mean, they pretty much have every single thing you could want. They have Super Bowl MVP, you have a Super Bowl MVP winner position, basically any single thing you could make a pick on, BetUS has you covered. Just use code YouTube150 when you sign up, and you'll get an 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit and 125% sign-up bonus on your next 2 deposits after that. Especially for this Super Bowl, BetUS is the place to make your picks, and thank you to BetUS for sponsoring today's video. Now moving us along here to the third overall pick, and the Chicago Blackhawks, who have a very pivotal pick here to make with the disappointment this season. They really need to start turning it around here quite soon. I don't think there's any doubt that they will go for one of the top centers in this class between Michael Misa and James Hagens. And I go back and forth with this pick so often because in terms of what Chicago has drafted already, what they love, I think a player like James Hagens is somebody that they would have previously absolutely gone for. But to me, ultimately, the player that I think will end up being the pick is Michael Misa. And to me, I think it is the smart one. Even though I do prefer James Hagens, Michael Misa to me is right there as a bona fide superstar of the future. And especially when we look at a player that can be a great second line center behind Connor Bedard, I think a player like Michael Misa fits that role much better than James Hagens would. I think in Misa's case, his game is driven by his smarts, his adaptability, his maturity all over the ice. His skill set is pretty radiant, and that's why he's been such a productive player this year. 92 points in 45 games is just straight up ridiculous. But he's somebody that is just such a smart, collected, and well-rounded 200-foot player, and that's why he's been such a dominant guy at such a young age as well. To me, in James Hagens' case, it's a lot more skill. It's a lot more of a dynamic play up the ice, which I think Chicago already has going forward. In Michael Misa's case, though, he fills a hole that Chicago doesn't quite have. In Misa's case, he fills a hole that is pretty clear, and that is the size. Even though it might not matter to some of us, to NHL GMs especially, I think it really does. In Misa's case, he's 6'1", but you look at a lot of the players they've drafted in the first round recently, players like Connor Bedard, of course, 5'10", Moore, 5'11", Kanserov as a second rounder, 5'9", Frank Nazar, 5'9". Really, one of the only exceptions has been Sasha Boivera at 6'2", but I think he's a lot more of a third-line center rather than a true quality second-line center player. In Misa's case, though, I think he is right there as a dependable all-around centerman, and I think that will win out, especially when we look at what Chicago needs. I think they could really use a defensively minded 200-foot guy in the future there. In terms of what Chicago needs, in terms of what they don't have, Misa is right there as the perfect option, and honestly, I think they'll regret it if they don't end up with him. Now we move on to the 4th overall selection here in the Nashville Predators. They have, to me, the easiest draft pick out of any of these teams, and that is drafting James Hagens at 4th overall. Nashville doesn't quite have a lot of top-end skill players, especially in the center group in their pool right now. Hagens would absolutely buck that trend, though, and give them a dynamic puck possession force that they desperately need. Plus, Nashville already drafted Teddy Stiga, James Hagens' new line mates, last year in the draft. Those two together would be awesome to see in the NHL, and they would work off so well like they're doing already in BC. In Hagens' case, though, he gives Nashville an elite player that I think they could use more of. They already got players like Forsberg there in the 4 group, but Hagens is there clearly for the future. And honestly, for the Preds, it might have been worth it to be a complete disappointment this year, because landing Hagens at 4th overall would be a true success. Now at 5th overall, this is a pick that I think if Seattle's outside the top 4, they're just simply going to make. I think they're going to select Ratty Murka out of the WHL. As we see it, especially with Seattle, they are very Canadian Hockey League lenient. They are a team that loves to draft, especially at the WHL, just like they did getting Berkeley Catton in the first round of last year's draft. I mean, they're going to go back and go to their home team in Seattle with the Thunderbirds, where Ratty Murka is transitioning very well. Obviously, the 6'6" Czech D is somebody that this year wasn't really given much of an opportunity back home. You can see in the WHL this season, in 24 games with Seattle, he already has 2 goals, 20 assists, 22 points, has been a lot more active offensively and engaged than I thought he would be, but he has some great tools here with his heads-up play, with the physical traits that he has. His skating can get a little bit choppy here and then on the rush, especially, is a little bit clear, but he's somebody that I think has a lot of potential with the way he thinks the game, and offensively, he's been engaged on the rush. He's trying new things, and especially at the level that he's at, I love to see that. There is a lot of rawness there, but I think a lot of potential to be a really consistent middle pair defenseman. Considering how many forwards and offensive defensemen they drafted over the years, I think Ratty Murka fills a hole, especially on that right side, that I think they might be needing in the future. Somebody that can play a shutdown role, but also have some puck movement ability that goes pretty underrated. Now, as you can tell, this is where the draft really does open up, and we go on to a player that was more towards the 15 range of the World Juniors that has risen up to number 6. With the Buffalo Sabres, I think they're going to go in a little bit of a different direction here and go with Anton Frundell. Somebody that has been all over the place this year with injuries, with inconsistency, but over the last month, he's looking like he's back. He was a locked-in top 3 player for me heading into the season, and somebody that with those injuries wasn't really able to get going, but now in the Allsvenskan, he's been a lot better as of late, especially over the last few weeks, and really since the 2025 year started. You can see in 21 games, 6 goals, 5 assists, 11 points, which is pretty solid production for a men's league, and we'll talk about that with Victor Eklund especially. He's someone that is looking a lot more comfortable, a lot more assertive, and that really lends his game and his strengths a lot better, I think, for the future. To me, with Frundell, the big qualities for him are the maturity, his simplicity in his game, as well as his shooting ability. He is somebody that I think is going to be absolutely feasting as a one-timer option on the power play going forward. That is something that I think is going to be a main thing for him as well. But I look at what Buffalo needs, what I think they could use more of, and I think in that center situation with potentially trades of Dylan Cousins, I think they might need some more centers here coming up. In Frundell's case, I think he could absolutely play that position well, though, and effectively. With his size, with the way he uses it, how good of a protector he is of the puck, I think they could use more of that physical element, and Frundell does bring that. Now, at 7th overall, we go on to the Philadelphia Flyers, and just like Seattle with Merca, this is a fit that I just find so much potential in. I think they're going to end up selecting Victor Eklund. Now, again, they don't typically go for European players, especially Swedish players in the first round, but they did draft Jack Berglund last year, and to me, if I'm looking at players that I want to have as a Matvei Michkov line mate, Eklund is so perfectly in that mold. Yes, he's not incredibly big at 5'11", 161 pounds, but he is so shifty in getting the puck back. You almost don't expect him to be such a dog along the boards, be such a player that can dominate possession, get the puck back against bigger competition, but Eklund always seems to find a way. He is so good, and we saw that at the World Juniors in stripping the puck and getting it back for his team. 6 points in 7 games there, and in the Allsvenskan, 20 points and 11 goals in 32 games. I think he's just going to be such an effective complementary guy that I would just love to see him in Philly, especially alongside Michkov, a player that can get the puck back to him effectively. Eklund is going to be perfect in that role. And I look up the left wing for that forward group, and especially now with trades of Joel Farabee, it opens up a lot more of an avenue here for Eklund to not just get drafted, but get a big opportunity with the Flyers. Now, at 8th overall, we go on to yet another Pennsylvania team here in the Pittsburgh Penguins, who I think are going to have a really interesting pick here. Now, to me, I think it's between Roger McQueen and Caleb Denoye. I think they are going to go for a center in this draft, most likely, especially after trading Braden Yeager for Rucker McGrody. I think that opens up a little bit of a hole there. But to me, I think most likely the pick will be Denoye in the end. He's something that we've seen, especially in the Bob McKenzie rankings, has been rising up boards exponentially. In fact, I wouldn't even be surprised to see him go higher than this. It just depends on what teams are in that top 5. But Denoye is just such a compact and solidified 200-foot player. Has some good flashes, especially up the rush. And you can see in 41 QMJHL games, some great production. 65 points and on pace for 100 points and 45 goals. To me, the big strengths with Denoye, though, are just that playmaking ability, the vision there, and also the 200-foot game. The smarts that he has, especially in being a support player up the ice. I think he's just going to be a really reliable centerman that just does a lot of the right things. I don't think he's going to be a brilliant player, but as an okay second line, great third line centerman, I think he'll be exactly in that role and playing it perfectly in the NHL. Definitely one of the highest floors, I would say, out of anybody in the top 10. Now, getting us started at 9th overall, we have the Anaheim Ducks, and I'm going to be honest with you guys, I don't even know what to pick for this. There are so many different options I could see being a potential option for Anaheim. But to me, I look at what they've drafted, what they've prioritized, and what they would want to have going forward. And I think having a player like Roger McQueen at this spot and available, I think is going to be too good for the Ducks to pass up on. Now, this is more the range where I would have Roger McQueen personally, around this 8 to 10 range. And going to Anaheim, he's exactly what they've always wanted to draft. 6'5", 192 pounds, you can't teach that, and the Ducks, I think, are going to be gravitating towards him automatically. But with McQueen, he skates exceptionally well for his size. He protects the puck, especially up the boards, I think, in a really impactful way. I think just the opportunity and the potential that McQueen has is something that I think Anaheim is going to be prioritizing. I don't know how much I like the rawness that he exudes, and especially with his injury this year. There's so many different ways his career could go from this point. There's a lot of potential there, I will admit, but in terms of rawness, in terms of guys I want to see more refinement for, McQueen is at the top of the list. We'll see if the Ducks can turn him into something, and I think he would be a pretty interesting fit there, especially when we look at that center group going forward. There is a position for McQueen to fill. Now, finishing up the top 10 here with the St. Louis Blues, there were a lot of options I debated going towards, like a Malcolm Spence, a Lyndon Lakovich, but I look at how much that defense could be turned over in the next few years. I think Jackson Smith could be a really interesting option there. You already got Philip Broberg, but I think in Jackson Smith's case, he is pure cowboy hockey all the time. He is something that is pure pace, pure offense. You can see for Tri-City this year, 37 points in 49 games. He's something that with the skating, though, I think is going to have a good amount of opportunities to get back into the play if he is to make some mistakes here and there. To me, I think his brain is so offensively calculated that there's going to be some times where you want to have a shutdown defenseman next to him, but the opportunities that he creates, the deception that he provides, I think a team like St. Louis could really use more of that from the back end, and if they're looking to restart that defense, Jackson Smith will be one heck of a player to add. Now on to the Montreal Canadiens at 11th overall, and I think most likely, no matter what, I think they're going to go for a left wing in this draft. I think it is between Malcolm Spence and Lyndon Lakovich, but I think ultimately they will go for Lakovich, especially when we look at what Montreal needs more of, the size especially. I think Lakovich could be so much fun as a middle six left wing there, and what he's been able to do for Moose Jaw on a horrible team is pretty exceptional. 39 points, 17 goals in 31 games. With Lakovich, though, he is basically what I want McQueen to be. He's somebody that is so dynamic on the rush, such an absolute dog when he gets the puck. There is just so many opportunities he creates, so many odd man rushes he's able to start. He is just such a monster with the puck, and the offense that he's able to provide is just so much fun. I think Montreal could really use that element, especially in the middle six going forward. Lakovic provides that with size that I think is growing and is being used more and more correctly. Now, at 12th overall, the New York Rangers, obviously not the position they want to end off at the end of the season, but if they are to draft here, I think they will go for Jake O'Brien out of the Brantford Bulldogs. Now, the thing that is interesting with O'Brien is the creativity with his playmaking, because I don't think you're going to be seeing highlight reel passes out of him, but he always seems to make the right play with his passing ability, and you can see in 50 games this year for Brantford, he's been putting up some pretty great numbers, 69 points and 43 assists. He's somebody that just feeds through his vision, feeds through what he's able to see on the ice, how he's able to read things. He's just a very consistent player in that regard, and you know what you're going to be getting out of him. I don't think he's going to be more than a third line center, but I think you could unlock a little bit more with his playmaking and the vision there. Just a lot to work with that offense, and I think that's going to be the thing that projects him most to the NHL. Plus, he's not afraid to use his size to aid that offense, and that's a big reason why his offense has been so good this year. Now, even though I'm not as high on Jake O'Brien, I see the vision. Not as high on him, though. We go into a player at 13th overall that I just don't think will be a very good pick at 13th, but I look at the Boston Bruins and what they want, what they could need, and it would not surprise me in the slightest if they went for another bottom six projectable center, and I think Brady Martin is the perfect guy for that. He's not exceptionally huge, but in terms of players that use their size that are going to get drafted in the first round, Brady Martin is, to me, one of the more efficient players at it. In the physical aspect, he is just a absolute bulldog out there, trying to make chaos, trying to make hits, trying to engage physically. That is what Brady Martin is at his best. I mean, the Sioux Greyhounds this year, he hasn't had the greatest production, 40 points in 38 games, but I think the goal scoring knack, the drive for the net, that's going to be enough for Boston to just take the flyer on him at 13 and be completely fine with it. Not the pick I would make, but this is the Boston Bruins we're talking about. Now on to 14th overall, the New York Islanders. This is still a player that I think is a perfect fit for this franchise. We go on to Logan Hensler of the Wisconsin Badgers, who has been a lot better, I would say, since returning from the World Juniors. Got a couple more points recently, and he's up to 10 points in 23 games. You got to realize, though, just how offensively inept the Wisconsin Badgers are. And he is somebody that I think has had a pretty big turnaround here since the World Juniors, being a lot more refined defensively, but the offensive engagement has been a big thing for him. He's really been a lot more versatile on the rush, using his body, using that speed, and the confidence, I think, has taken a ways here. I think for the Islanders, most likely he's going to fit into this two-way puck rushing mold, and I think in Hensler's case, there's a lot of potential to fill that type of role. Now at 15th overall, we go on to the Columbus Blue Jackets, and I think this is going to be a team that trends in more of a two-way physical direction with their draft picks. And at 15th overall, I think they will select Malcolm Spence. To me, he's one of the most flawless players of this draft class. I don't think he has a lot of great skill level, or is going to be somebody that's going to be a perfect top six player. But in terms of a middle six guy who can just play in such a diverse amount of roles, can play on the penalty kill, can do so many different things for you, and play such a consistent 200-foot game, he's still going to be drafted in the top 15 automatically to me because of those attributes, because of how compact he is, because of how consistent he is day in and day out. 50 points and 45 games for the Erie Otters this year. He is somebody that I just think is going to be a perfect complementary guy on your middle six. Will just do a lot of different jobs for you. And I think teams are still going to be in need of a guy like that. Now at 16th overall, we go into the Vancouver Canucks, another team like the Rangers who does not want to end up in this position by the season's end. But we look at what they've done recently and how much of an influx position their center situation especially is. They've drafted a lot of wingers and a lot of defensemen recently, so I think they will go for a centerman, and I think Brayden Coots fits what they could need pretty perfectly going forward. He's somebody that is on the bigger side of things, 6 foot. I mean, I've seen him listed at 6'3", even though Elite Prospects has him at 6 foot. I don't know what the difference is. I just imagine he's somewhere in the middle there. But he's someone that is just so much fun to watch. In Seattle, he hasn't been given the greatest opportunity there, but he's the captain there already and has 46 points in 44 games. He's somebody, though, that is just so dynamic with the puck. He's somebody that is always looking to create offense, always looking to play up the rush and be the perfect support player. I think he's somebody that is versatile, too, with his physicality and how he's able to use it. He is somebody that I think could use a little bit more juice with his goal scoring, and I think might need a rusher up the ice on the wing, especially to get the most out of them. But I look at a player like Coots and what he could be in that middle six, and I think he could be pretty fun to watch there, especially with Pettersson and Hedel already there. I think he could be a good third line guy, could be a good second line player, and could step up if you really need him to as well. Just a very versatile centerman that I think Vancouver will get a lot out of. But that is my updated February 2025 NHL mock draft. A lot of changes since the last one, and I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and of course, hit that notification bell. I want to know your thoughts down below as well as we go here. What were your thoughts on my top 16? What did you guys agree with? What did you guys disagree with? And let me know your picks, especially for the top 5. If Utah especially were to draft up to number 2 overall, what do you think the draft order would look like? Let me know all your thoughts down below. Of course, share the video with all the hockey fans you guys know, and then click on this card for all of my hockey prospects talk right in one playlist, and use code YouTube150 with BetUS today. I will see you guys in the next one, though. Have a fantastic hockey day, and goodbye.